Ms. Albrecht asked if I would give the board and the community a little bit of a COVID-19 update. Did create a little bit of a slideshow for that, and that will be shown on your screen. And this is kind of the state of where we are right now. And Mr. Stengel, you can move on to the next slide. So I did give this to the board in their packet, or sent it to you today, but you may not have it handy. But first, what I wanted to do was lay out where we are with COVID in the county right now. And I've been sending you tracking numbers each week at the end of the week on Friday when the state puts out how Allegheny County is doing. And we specifically are looking at two numbers, the incident rate per 100,000, and I believe that is that's the top line of that chart. And then the PCR rate, or percent positivity, and that's given in percentage. And for this past week, we were 65.9 in incident rate per 100,000, and we were 4.3 in that PCR percent positivity.
And this is reported on our website as well, correct?
That's correct. We post the chart. I don't think we have this specific graphic, but we do put the chart up that has the numbers, and that above that is the link to the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Department of Health, their guidelines for how we determine instructional models. And if you remember, there's a low, moderate, and substantial. We have been in that moderate range for quite a long time. As you can see from that chart, when I asked the board to move to a hybrid model, we were trending downward. And as you can see, since that time, we've started to trend a little back upward. And you hear the explanation of that throughout the news media and from our public health officials regarding the students' return to college, the more gatherings, the cooler weather has moved people indoors. So just want you to be aware of that's kind of our environment right now, and that's what we're dealing with. Okay, next slide, please. So the COVID dashboard, we have a dashboard that includes all this information on. It tracks, and you can see a little graphic there. It tracks each school. We track students and staff. We track active versus inactive. So if we have a case of a student who was positive and then moved to inactive after the 12 days and is returned back to school, we still track that. We also report the blow this up just one bit here. The employee quarantine, both the quarantine for students. For example, Ms. Hess will get a few email from parents and saying, although their children was not available or was not COVID positive, because of close contacts, they were being asked to quarantine. And the same with employees. We keep track of all those. So this is updated regularly. So just about every day we're putting this up there, maybe twice a day we're trying to get this corrected. So if you have any questions about what our positivity rates are, or employee active rates, our student active rates, how many kids are in quarantine, how many staff are in quarantine, what schools, you will see that on this dashboard. And if you press that link that's on the slide, you'll be able to see that too. Okay, yeah, Chris, did you take us to there? Okay, good. And why don't you scroll down to the bottom? You want to scroll down to the bottom of that dashboard, Chris? And so you can see it live working there. And I want to impress upon parents and the board that at the very beginning of COVID, the Allegheny County Health Department, the Department of Health were much more, if you had one case, the whole team is out. They have become much more targeted in their recommendations and instructions to school districts. And they have been doing a much better job contact tracing, making sure that we don't have to send a whole school home if there was a child who was just in one classroom or the students were working in pods. And so they're being much more specific about it. So we had some questions about, well, some general guidelines that the Department of Health put out a while ago said if you have 2 to 4 cases, the school had to close for 5 to 7 days. But that guideline has evolved over time, and I think in a much more rational manner. It gives really the particulars of the circumstance and the case really are what dictates what we do and how we do it. I also received some questions about the department, Allegheny County Health Department doesn't tell you what to do. Well, I will be very clear that the public health officials are guiding us in our decision-making process. And ultimately, only the superintendent can close schools. But we don't make that decision without consultation with the Allegheny County Health Department. So we are really talking about specific instances, identifying all the circumstances around it, and making sure that we're making good decisions about it. Chris, do you want to go back to that slideshow? Let's move down to the health and safety plan. What we have come to learn, and I think what all the health experts have come to learn, is that redundant, multi-layered safety measures are important. So it starts with a face covering and a mask for yourself. It includes the ventilation and the filters that we have going on in our classrooms and in our buildings, the amount of air exchange we have, the level of filtering we're doing, making sure we're keeping physical distance whenever possible. A really critical element here is that self-screen and that reporting. And although certain symptoms can come on as the day goes along, we are really asking people to, even if they feel a little scratchy throat or some minor potential evidence that they may have something, that they really, out of abundance of caution, stay home until they determine what's going on there. We ask our faculty and staff to maintain good hygiene practices, washing hands often, making sure we're cleaning high-touch surfaces. And again, critical to our operation as a school district is that people stay home when they're not feeling well. And we have to be really good stewards of our neighbors to make sure that we're not infecting other people around us. Okay, I mentioned this a little bit on response to confirmed cases. You can go on to the next one, Chris, thank you. First, it starts with information from students, parents, and employees. If people don't provide us with the information, then we don't have it and we can't take the appropriate steps. So we really need to rely on information coming in from our students, parents, and employees. Accurate information, whether they're quarantining, whether they tested positive, whether they're going to get positive because of a close exposure. That information is really critical to us to help us to maintain our instructional model of kids being in schools. Again, context and circumstances surrounding each exposure is very critical. If it's what we're always trying to trace is whether it's being spread in the building or whether it's coming in from outside the building or whether it's on a team or whether it's from a group of students who have potted together. That context and circumstances is really important. The Allegheny County Health Department does consult with us on every specific case. Deanna Hess talked directly, oftentimes, with the head of the Allegheny County Health Department, and we really spell out the entire situation, whether it was a family member, whether it was somebody who was in close contact, when was the last time they were in the building, when was the last time they were at an activity. And we really go through that with them so that in consultation with them, our internal team, which would be Dr. Davis, Dr. Irvin, the building principal, Deanna Hess, the other building nurse if it's at another building, that we're all making a thorough review of the entire situation and then we're determining what the recommended course of action is. And as I said again, only the superintendent can determine whether a school is open or closed. So ultimately, that responsibility rests with me to make that decision. And then what we do after that is we inform everybody. Not only do we put it on the dashboard, I think all of you have seen emails that we have sent to our staff, sent to our families. I make sure that you're aware of the circumstances of whether we have a case, what we're going to do with that, whether we're going to remain open or whether we're going to close. Chris, next one. Communication. We've heard time and time again about how important communication is, and we have really tried to up our game to make sure that every time we have a positive case in the district, whether it's a student or staff member, that we are sending that out to our entire school community. If you are a close contact, as defined by the Allegheny County Health Department, either the Allegheny Health Department's person will call you for that, the contact tracer from the Allegheny County Health Department, or Deanna Hess will be telling you about that. So we have a little bit of redundancy built into that, and oftentimes you'll hear from both of them. But if you are a close contact, you will be notified. So after we've done our contact tracing, we will notify you as if there's any additional action for your child particularly, or a staff member to take. We do update the dashboard, as I mentioned. We put all of our school communications up there. There's a link to both the dashboard and the COVID-19. All that information is up there. Okay, next one, Chris. We did a quick and purposefully quick survey so that we could get quick responses back from our families at the end of the first 9 weeks. We had 1,792 responses, or about 54% response rate from our 3,300 families. And go ahead, Chris, we'll link to the survey itself. And this is on our district website. You can go and look to the survey itself. We structured it so that we would know what school your child was in. We would know what type of instructional model that you were in. Chris, you can go ahead and press on response per student. Okay, go up a little bit. That shows you that most 1,048 were in elementary school, 638 were in middle school, 711 were in the high school. Go on to next, the instructional model. You can see that 1,362 were in hybrid, 526 were in the Cyber Learning Academy. The next drop down. One of the things that you always want to do when you give a survey is also try to communicate a little bit. So we were communicating that there is a remote support at mtlsd.net that we wanted to direct people to in case they didn't know if they needed help with technical support. And as you can see, we either got a 3, 4, or 5 in our technical support. And Mr. Stengel and any relevant stakeholder that any of these questions pertain to will be looking at their individual data. Plus, there were 780 comments at the end also that we're sifting through also. And there was another question about how is it technology. So that was it. All right, communication. Have teachers, counselors, administrators been responsive to families and students? And yes, we could have broken it out and asked 3 questions, one for teachers, one for counselors, and one for administrators. And certainly you can see the results of that one also. But we thought we were just trying to get a general idea as to whether our team was being responsive to the parents when they had questions. The health and safety plan. The district has a health and safety plan for any instructional mode posted on the district's website. And as you can see, we got either a 3, 4, or 5. Those are the majority of where the responses were. So the health and safety plan includes all the strategies and actions we would take in any instructional mode, whether the kids were here 5 days a week or they were totally remote. Those are all spelled out in our health and safety plan. Dashboard, we mentioned that a little bit, trying to push people to the dashboard. So if they were really interested in or concerned about how many students at Washington or Lincoln or at the high school were either in quarantine or were positive, they could see that. Level of communication, same thing there. We were really interested in looking at where we were communicating. We could have broken that out into 3 questions also, but we were just trying to get a general sense of the communication. And you can see the results of that one. And then we wanted to re-advertise that the lunch program, breakfast program, the federal government has offered that to any student who lives in Mount Lebanon for free. And we were trying to get a sense of how many people were participating in our school lunch program and whether they thought the quality was where it should be. And more importantly, the final question was an open-ended question that parents could write anything that they thought was appropriate for us to hear. And we are sifting through those responses right now. And they go anywhere from thanks for doing a great job to the breakfast that we were giving out seemed to be high in sugar. So we are looking at all the responses that people gave us and trying to make improvements as possible. So that's the survey. Chris, go back to the slideshow. Let's go on to winter athletics. A big question is, as our winter sports begin to start up again, what guidelines has WPIAL given us? And Chris, if you press on that link, it'll take you to a letter from PIAA, actually the state body. And it does describe basketball, competitive cheer, swimming and diving, and wrestling, and it does make recommendations for all those. And Mr. Grogan is meeting with all of our coaches to go through all those recommendations. So if anybody were interested on what we're doing with athletics, you would have the opportunity to go back and look at this document. It's a pretty lengthy document. And Chris, go on back to the slideshow and planning for the future. And again, I'll reiterate that all of our instructional modes, whether it's 5 days in, whether it's a hybrid mode, or whether it's totally remote, are clearly identified and outlined in the reopening education plan and the health and safety plan. But probably most critical for everybody is this statement I'm going to make now, that is based upon the current COVID-19 environment. There is no timeline to transition away from our current instructional mode. So if we were to look at the trending of the COVID in Allegheny County, you could jump to some conclusions about what we should or should not be doing. But at the current time, I have no plan to recommend to the board to change out of this instructional model. And we did get some questions from some parents as to whether the Cyber Learning Academy or that remote option would remain available throughout the year. And the answer to that was yes.